Good evening. We'll go ahead and call tonight's special meeting to order. If you would join us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'm sorry, Renee, I forgot to ask you to show us all present except for Mr. Satterley. Thank you. Do need approval of tonight's agenda. I don't believe there are any addendums that I'm aware of.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Pavey. Is there a second? Mr. White, thank you. Any discussion or questions? All right, all in favor of approving tonight's agenda? That's 6-0. Thank you. All right. We have no public comments tonight, do we, Renee? All right. So we'll move on to the consent agenda. We've got items 1 through 5. Need a motion to approve?
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second? Thank you, Mrs. Kraft. Any questions or discussion? All right. All in favor of approving tonight's consent agenda? All right. 6-0. Thank you. Tonight we have gifts to buildings.
Oh, no, you can hear.
Mrs. Kraft, would you like to?
I'm going to try to find them.
All right. They're on the board behind you if you want to cheat.
I had the cheat sheet to give to my friend, and he isn't here. Now I have to. Okay. It looks like New Washington from Clearwater Properties in the drama department got $200, and also another drama department from Ryan and Randy Grigsby for $25. So $225. Thank you very much. I'm sure New Washington's really pleased to have that.
I'm sure. And so would you like to make the motion to approve those gifts, Mrs. Kraft?
I will make that motion.
Thank you very much. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. White. Any questions? All right, all in favor? All right, that's 6-0. And so move on to our action items, and first we have our strategic plan approval.
Board, as you recall, last board meeting, we gave you a fairly comprehensive presentation related to the strategic plan. It included a draft of a vision and a mission statement, as well as an action plan. That action plan, again, covered 4 major areas: student achievement and instruction, finance, facilities and technology, and public relations marketing. Again, over 70 community members, 10 meetings, 5 months. Very proud of their efforts, and also the leadership shown by our executive team as facilitators. And so at this point in time, I would ask our board to support the mission and vision alterations, as well as the action plan that has been recommended by the Strategic Planning Committee.
Motion to approve.
Thank you, Mr. White.
Second.
Second, Mr. Hall. Thank you. Any discussion or questions or comments?
I just would like to say that I had the opportunity to work with one of the subgroups, and I found that everyone took this process very seriously and appreciated the input from our community on this. I was completely outnumbered as a board member, and I was happy to see that.
Anyone else?
I just want to echo what Teresa. I appreciate all of our staff's hard work and all of the community's participation, and I think it's great that the community came together to put together a plan for our corporation that's put together by the community, not just by us. So thank you all.
Anyone else?
No, I think Dr. Mellon's got the tough part now.
So. Got to implement it once you approve it.
Right.
And we're excited about that too.
Before we take a vote, I just want to say thanks to our staff for your hard work and your support and your diligence and your patience. I know it's not easy working with over 70 people, even though we were split up into groups. And Dr. Mellon, I know that when we asked you to come on as our superintendent, one of the top 3 things we charged you with was to get a strategic plan in place. And you've done that, and we're very much appreciative. We feel like it's our roadmap. It's where we're going. And it keeps all of us in line. Every decision we make, every question we ask, it should all be, is this part of our strategic plan? And I think that helps us all stay focused. And so I thank you for getting that job done.
Thank you.
All in favor? 6-0. Thank you. Next, we have our resolution for our Jeffersonville School Resource Officer.
I'll have Mr. Hare come up and not only address that, but also the next item, which relates to the Charlestown School Resource Officer.
Yes. Thank you, Board. Just wanted to kind of talk through, just give you just a little bit of background here on the interlocal between Jeffersonville Police Department, Jeffersonville High School, Parkview, and River Valley. You have in front of you the interlocals, and I just wanted to explain how we kind of came up to the figures as far as the pricing. Back in '98 was the first time that an SRO was approved, and that was at Jeffersonville High School. And then the other one was approved in '05, and you'll remember we split one between Parkview and River Valley. The Parkview River Valley interlocal called for a payment of $31,900. The Jeffersonville High School one called for a payment of $37,101. I met with Chief Grimm, and basically what we did was we added those two together. That's $69,000, and we divided it by 2. That comes out to $34,500. And I said, you know, let's just make these all the same. Can we bring all 3 officers on board and pay that same amount? And Chief Grimm agreed to that. So basically, the 2 resource officers we have now, that total cost is $69,000. So there's nothing new for those 2 positions. It's just adding that 3rd position on this particular interlocal for $34,500. So each one of those 3 officers will cost us $34,500, and that's for 180 days. That will put one at Jeffersonville High School, one at Parkview, and one at River Valley. And the one at Parkview will cover those feeder elementaries, and the one at River Valley will cover the feeder elementaries in River Valley.
Yes, ma'am. All right.
I'll second.
Motion by Mrs. Kraft, second by Ms. Davy. Any questions or comments? All right, all in favor? And that's 6-0.
Thank you. The next item is the resolution interlocal with the City of Charlestown, and really excited to build this partnership with the City of Charlestown. That was something that had been strained, I think it's fair to say. We had used the county, if you'll recall, to cover Charlestown, and then New Washington as well. We were approached by the mayor and the Charlestown City Police, who are here with us tonight, and said, hey, we'd like to come to you, and what about putting one of us in one of our community schools? And we certainly jumped at the chance. So what you have in front of you is an interlocal, and this would station a school resource officer at Charlestown Middle School, and we'll cover Jonathan Jennings, and then we'll continue to keep the county at Charlestown High School, and they will cover Pleasant Ridge, and of course they both can, you know, take care of the other one should they need to. A little bit different situation on this, and a lot of it has to do with the pay structures between the 2 police units. Their proposal here is basically a new patrol officer base pay is $37,784 with insurance at $14,600, and then there's a uniform allowance for a total of $53,839, and the agreement there is to split that in half, and our cost will be $26,919.50, and again, that would be for 180 days.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
And is there a second? Mr. White, thank you. Any questions or discussion?
I have a question. Since we've got a county and a city, is there going to, I hope there's not going to be any turf issues there.
No, and quite honestly, that was part of the issue, and we've worked, he's laughing, but we've worked really close, and I think they were up at Charlestown High School, if I'm not mistaken, last week covering for us when Officer O'Keefe was somewhere else. So
if
it's
there's an issue at one school or the other, and then one of them needs to respond to help that person, they will do that.
Yes, Ms. Perkins, I really do believe we're past that.
Okay,
good. But that was certainly the point a few years ago.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Also, again, I'd just like to point out that Lieutenant Settles is here. He's done a great job for us, as you know, as an SRO here in Jeffersonville, and also Assistant Chief Jason Brody from Charlestown PD is here. Very impressed with him and with the entire Charlestown Police Department. I'm very excited about this partnership, and just talking to Jason on the phone today, you know, it's a very positive time for us, and obviously a very serious circumstance, but we need to have people that are committed and dedicated, and we have many of them, but 2 of them are right here in this room tonight.
You know, I think this is, to me, this is awesome. 3 things we got to do every day is protect our kids,
feed our kids and educate our kids. And we're taking great strides with this move. Thanks.
There's two things I really love about it. One is probably, I'm a little biased because my husband is a sheriff's deputy, but so oftentimes kids have a negative opinion of law enforcement. And I love the fact that our officers are in the schools interacting, and our students get to see them and mingle with them and interact with them in a positive way. And I think that's a great thing. And then also I appreciate the fact that you all have ensured that whether the state participates or not in the funding of this, that we will be able to sustain it financially. And so I appreciate that. Any other questions? All in favor? 6-0. Thank you, Travis. Next we have a job description.
Yes, Board. We have been doing a lot of work. Part of our strategic plan was twofold. First of all, how can we continue to better communicate with our community and promote our school corporation? And two of the tools that we feel are very important are our web page, obviously, and how that operates, looks, and functions, and as well as the ability to produce some videos on a fairly consistent basis that can not only be placed on our web page, but we could also disseminate out to our community through various other tools. Well, as we sat down and started to talk about this, we looked at a lot of options. And there are contractors that are out there that can produce these kinds of things for our corporation. But as we started to really compare pricing, we started to think about how could we possibly provide this level of service with it to our own corporation with an employee that would be vested in our corporation. And so what we did is we looked at our capital projects fund, and that's where this position, if it is filled, would come from and be funded, is in our capital projects fund. And what we have is we have a software called eSchool that we're no longer in need of and we're not going to renew, and it's a $72,000 per year cost. So when we saw that, we said, well, maybe what we could do is look at the possibility of hiring a person, so we're not adding to our capital project expenditures, but we could hire someone who could do the work we need and be vested in our corporation. So what we're bringing forward to you is a job description for a web and video specialist. It would be in a computer technician type of mode, but we need to go out and try to find someone who has the expertise needed to really take our web page, totally redesign the whole aspect of our web page, both on a corporation and school level, help to maintain it on a daily basis so that all of our schools, that we have the latest information there for our public, and then also start producing videos, preferably even on a weekly basis, 3 to 5 minute videos that could be out there in front of people that are highlighting all the great things that we're doing as a corporation. So tonight, what we're asking for is your approval of the job description as well as permission to post the position. If we could find the right fit that will be a high-quality person for us, great. If we can't, we'll let you know that, of course, and we'll have to look at different ways to use contracted services. Either way, we need to get the service taken care of. So that's what we're asking from you this evening.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Perkins. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Pavey. Any questions for Dr. Mellon or discussion?
So the salary for this position would not be taken from the general fund, so it couldn't be taken away from a teacher's salary.
Correct.
Thank you.
Yep, absolutely. In fact, that's so important because we're in that era where we are reducing our general fund expenditures, and it will impact people. So it's important that our public understands that we were spending $72,000 a year on this software product that we feel we no longer need because we have another software that we feel is better for us and that we're already paying for. So we had 2 different software applications. We only need one. So as soon as we found out that we could pull that one software off the table, that gave us $72,000, and that is the money that would be utilized to help pay for this position. So it's in our capital projects fund.
So both were in the capital projects, the software and this salary.
Correct.
Okay.
Well, just to sort of make a point of what Ms. Gilkey said a while ago, everything is tied back to our strategic plan, and this was a component that was identified in the strategic plan that was much needed. So, again, this gets back to us being able to make decisions and bounce them off the plan and say this is the right thing to do from a directional standpoint. So, I think it's a good thing.
Anything else?
I just think we have someone, we'll find someone in this community that can do this. And for us to be thinking this way, we have to continue to be able to find money to do tech things. That's just the way it's going to be. We found that money, and thank you.
Anything else? All right, all in favor? And that's 6-0. Thank you. We're to board reports and requests. Mr. Hall, do you have anything?
Nope.
Nope. All right. Ms. Perkins?
Nope.
No, thank you.
Mr. White? No, thank you. Mrs. Kraft?
No, thank you.
Mr. Pavey?
Nothing.
Okay. So we'll move on then to, we have a little bit to talk about under board planning, and this is actually related to board goals. I want to announce something. I'm actually pretty excited about it. And I'll give our public a little background. When we had our board retreat, as a board, we agreed that we would like to become an exemplary board. And in order to do that, there are certain steps, certain criteria that we have to meet through the Indiana School Board Association. The first step is that we have to become an outstanding board. And then we have to self-evaluate. We have to look at ourselves and say, okay, are we doing this right? Are we doing that right? Where can we improve? Where can we be better? And then we have to all agree and participate in educating ourselves as board members. We have to go to workshops and conferences and things like that. Through all that, we earn points that get us to becoming an exemplary board. Well, I just want to let you all know that our board has reached the first goal in becoming an outstanding board. So kudos to us. I got the letter from the Indiana School Board Association on March 6th. And in addition to our board becoming, achieving outstanding status, we also have 3 board members who have received individual CAP pins. And CAP is, I forget what the acronym is, but it's basically the points that you get for going to educational workshops and conferences. And so Kevin Satterley has reached level 1 status, and that's after only 2.5 years on the board, which is pretty outstanding. Give him a clap even though he's not here. Now, Mark Pavey's been on the board the same length of time, but has actually achieved level 2 CAP status. So, good job, Mark. And I don't really like to talk about myself too much, but I reached master level.
I will, yes. Mrs. Gilkey's at master level, so congratulations to her.
So I take education real serious. I feel like, we have to be educated on best practices and philosophies and the best way of doing business in order to be the board that our community deserves. And so I'm proud of all of us, and I'm looking forward to us reaching that next step.
Very good. Very good. Policy review is next, and at this time there are a couple of things I'd like Mrs. Lewis to come forward, if you don't mind, board, and talk about website advertising to begin with.
Good evening. Of course, we're always looking for ways to subsidize cost to the corporation and ways to generate revenue, and so we have a policy that we're going to present. We actually haven't put a number to it yet because we're not asking for any action this evening. This is not even a first reading. It'll be brought to you in April for first reading. But this is a website advertising policy, and we're interested in suggestions, ideas, thoughts if you have them. We've actually done some research, and the policy is very similar to other school corporations in this area. The pricing is certainly competitive with what other school corporations in this area are using. So we think we're in the ballpark for what we need to be doing. For the general public, basically what we're saying is we would allow advertising on our corporation website, and that website advertising, we'd have charges for how much it would be to put the ad on there. There'd be a review process. We wouldn't allow political, religious, or controversial advertising on the website. The superintendent would have the discretion to make determinations about the type of advertising. The board would be involved to reject any advertising that was requested to be placed there. We'll make sure things are done in a non-discriminatory manner, and we think this is time to do it. We're pretty excited about the opportunity that this could be a way to raise additional revenue. The goal would be to have that money go into a website advertising fund, because we're very limited on the amount of money that we can use to promote our school corporation, and any way that we can get to generate additional monies to help promote what we do and the good things that we succeed in here in Greater Clark. We want to have those funds available. So we would target that money to a website advertising fund, and we've talked with Dr. Dykle to make sure that we could set that up in that way, and he's worked with us, and we can. So nothing for you all to act on this evening. Take a look at it. If you have thoughts before the first reading in April, please email me, give me a call with your ideas, and we'll move on from there, unless you have questions this evening. Okay?
The second thing, Mrs. Lewis, if you don't mind, Board, one of the things that we thought was important is that we do a review of policy with our administrative team. And I asked Mrs. Lewis to put something together, and I'll have her go into details related to that, but we thought I wanted you to hear what we've been doing in that regard.
Right. So now I'm prepared to read to you 41 policies and explain to you all the ins and outs about those policies. That's really just a joke. I know you're delighted, but what we did do was had a little refresher course for our administrators and our school principals by highlighting certain policies, and you'll see that we actually had 44 of them because we have hundreds of policies. But just to give them kind of a thumbnail sheet, a guideline, a cheat sheet sort of to say, to keep in their drawer on their desk. And so if there was an issue or a question about a policy, for example, PTOs, how are they organized, how are they set up, what are their goals and objectives, do they have autonomy, do they have to work with the president or the principal of the building, all of those types of things. So what we did was we just pulled these policies, gave them a quick thumbnail of each of those policies, and then certainly told them if they had questions they could contact us for additional assistance or information. We'll pick some additional policies to do another review in a few more months with our principals, just to keep them updated. Items that we touched on certainly were the PTO, PTAs, those adult support groups, facility use, because certainly they are the ones that start at the ground level when somebody wants to use their building, the fees and categories related to facilities use, anti-harassment bullying policy. We think that's so important that they always keep in the forefront of their daily thoughts that we do not allow harassment and bullying in our school corporation, and we have policies and procedures to deal with those types of situations. We had animals in the classroom. You remember you all passed that one recently, and we kind of laughed about it. But we've already had a situation that came up, with whether or not we could keep a snake in the classroom, and we had to work through that with the teacher, and we're just going to follow the policy because that's what they're there for. Excessively hot or inclement weather, we do have a policy on that. If it gets to be 110 degrees and kiddos are outside practicing football, we have some procedures and protocols for that. Field trips, they always need a little refresher on the field trips procedure and when they can go and what they can do and what permissions they have to have in place for the success of the trip. So, those are a few of them. Sales of books, equipment, and supplies, by example. If you received a gift to your school, it's yours to use in your building, but if we have accepted it as a school corporation and the board has voted on accepting it, it really is the property of the school corporation. So at the time that it becomes obsolete and we need to get rid of it, there is a process for getting rid of obsolete equipment. And so we have a policy. So we just kind of gave them highlights, little cliff notes for what we had in those policies, so that they could, if the issue came up, they'd know where to look. And if not, they can contact me and I'll help them find it. So.
And Board, I would tell you, Sandy did a great job because, as she pointed out, there are so many policies, and the listing that was provided just gives you a small sampling. But I think the main thing as an administrator, we want them to know where to go find these policies, and we want them thinking that when something out of the ordinary is happening, something that's not part of their normal daily routine is occurring, we want them to know it's important that they go and consult those policies. And so I think that's the message that was sent, is make sure you have that mindset that when something is out of the ordinary or unique, go to the policy. That'll give you direction. Of course, they also know that Sandy is a tremendous resource. So she's just an email or a phone call away. But so I think we did a good job of setting the tone for our administrative team moving forward.
Thank you. Thank you, Sandy. All right, budget review.
Okay, just want to let you know I do have a pet ladybug in my office, and I don't think we have a policy on that, so I talk to her every morning. Let you know that.
A pet ladybug.
Oh.
Yeah.
Anyway, some good news. We do have our budget now approved for 2013. The bad news is what you see up there is still the old information. We had already prepared this, and then we just got our budget 1782 notice in. Some of the things, just to let me identify some of the things here, we're showing a revenue of about $67 million. We're going to be close to that number in our 1782, and I'll show you that information. Expenditures are a little bit higher than what we really anticipate them to be, because I don't have all of the budget reductions in there yet. We were waiting until all the teachers identified themselves as far as which ones wanted to retire. So that'll be updated on the next one, just to let you know. So don't get excited when you see that we're $2 million in the red projected for 2013 for the general fund. Okay, so we won't spend too much time on these. If you go to, we don't need to look at the pension ones or that one. Go to capital projects. We're spending some money here for, you can see in January we spent $699,000. Last month in February we spent $515,000. A lot of this was to catch up for all the A phones that we had to put in and things of that nature, security things. Steve is going to be spending money like crazy here pretty soon. We'll come back before the board and ask for some more ideas as far as how we can spend the money through geo bonds, things of that nature, for security type things, because our capital projects can't handle it. Just with all the roof projects that we're going to have to be doing this year, that's going to eat up a good chunk of our capital projects for 2013. And we're not in a proactive mode yet in capital projects. We're more of a reactive mode, and we need to get into a proactive mode, on all of our maintenance items. Transportation, when you look at transportation, now capital projects is going to be affected by the tax caps. The first three, the general fund, debt service, and pension debt, they're no longer affected by the tax caps. Capital projects will take a bigger hit. We'll see about 62% of the tax cap money going to be reduced from capital projects, about 35% going to bus transportation operating, and then the remaining 5 or 7% will go against bus replacement. So we will lose revenue in those three funds, just to let you know. Transportation operating, we think will be around $5.6 million in revenue. Expenditures $5,061,000, but then we have to worry about the tax caps. So we have to try to reduce our expenditures in transportation, and we'll try to do that beginning of next school year. We're doing some things now that we could see, hopefully, to reduce some money. Bus replacement, we know this budget is way off because we only got $1.1 million
is what it was approved, but when you deduct the tax caps, we're down to like $700,000. So that's really going to affect our payments to our contracted drivers. So we're going to have to put more money now into the bus operating fund, and we're not going to be as able to buy as many buses. That'll be a problem too. So that's kind of it on where we're at right now, but let's go to the next one, the 1782 notice. I'll just give you 3 slides here just to give you some idea where we're at. First one is just kind of a history as far as what we did last year, what was approved, what we advertised, and what was actually approved this year. In the general fund, there is no tax rate. That was taken over back in 2009 because of the sales tax going up 1%. Debt service, we advertised 64.89 cents, came in at 49.09. Remember, we always were told to advertise high to protect the school corporation, so we showed an artificially low assessed valuation to drive the rates up just to protect the school corporation. So debt service went up almost 2 cents. Pension debt went down 1 3/4% or 2/3%, a penny and 2/3. Capital projects went up 4 cents. Transportation operating went up 0.03 of a cent, and then bus replacement went down 2 cents. So the total increase for our tax rate went up 2.78 cents, which isn't too bad considering our assessed valuation dropped by another $70 million. That's part of the reason, if not the major reason. Okay, next one. Here's a history of our budgets over the last 8 years. You can see we started in 2005. We had an $85 million budget. $1.34 was the tax rate. Tax levies were almost $30 million, and our assessed valuation was $2.2 billion. You can see over the years, going up to 2008, our budget increased to $101 million. Tax rate increased to 1.62. The assessed valuation was $3 billion, and our tax levy was $49 million. Then starting in 2009, you could see the tax rate drop tremendously because of the general fund coming off of the tax rate. So it went from $1.62 to 81 cents, but now you could start seeing the decline in the assessed valuation. We've been in decline ever since, except for 2011 when it went up $5 million. But ever since then, it's been going down. Look at our tax caps. You know, we started in 2009 at $13,000. 2010, $809,000. 11, $1,385,000. Then last year, $1,744,000. I'm projecting $2.4 million for this year. Remember, 62% of it will go against CPF, 35% roughly will go against transportation operating, and the balance will go against bus replacement. So you'll see how it's going to affect everything. And when I looked at all the TIF districts that we have in our school district, they've captured over $500 million of assessed valuation that we don't get to use in our tax rate. So if you would add another $500 million onto our $2.2 billion, our tax rate would be way down. We would probably see hardly any tax caps in our community just by doing some of those things. But I understand the reason of TIF districts. You know, I support them to a point. Okay. Now the last slide shows the general fund. We were approved for $69,761,000. We're only going to have revenue to support $66,853,000 of it. Projected expenditures, including tax caps, I think we're going to be around $67,551,000, and we spent $66,145,000 last year. But remember, we moved $1.5 million roughly out of the general fund, moved it into the rainy day fund. Now, the revenue is like a moving target with the state right now. We were just notified that in the past, full-day kindergarten, we would get a check in December for the full amount. We would get $2.1 million in December. Goes to fund the 2012 or 2013 budget. Now the state, in their infinite wisdom, is saying, we're going to give it to you 1/12 a month, 1/12 of your dollar every month. So we're only going to get $1 million of our $2 million between now and December. And then the other 1 million will come in the next 6 months. So the state is doing their little sleight of hand trick, you know, by moving money from one fiscal year into the next, or one calendar year into the next. So I was thinking we were gonna be close to about 900,000 in the red, and then we would have to use rainy day fund to offset that general fund deficit. Now I'm looking at 1.9 million in the red, just because of that one move. Now, another thing that happened that we didn't anticipate, we get impact money because of River Ridge, the ammunition plant. We didn't get any of it last year. We had budgeted 800,000 last year. This year we got, so far we've been notified, we've gotten 2 payments, 698,000 apiece. So that was a blessing in disguise that we didn't anticipate, because we're in a 3-year review. They've gone through the 3-year review, and now they're starting to give us the money. So I don't know if there's going to be another check coming or not, but that kind of offsets some of the loss that we were getting from full-day kindergarten. So anyway, once the legislature is done, then the only other thing I have to worry about is tax collections. How does tax collections affect all the other funds? You know, are we going to be at 98, 99% collection? We won't know that until December. But it won't affect the general fund because there is no tax collection in that one. So when you look at debt service, we were approved for $11,318,000. The revenue generates $12,917,000. But remember, this is an 18-month fund, so we're actually projecting the next 6 months in our budget, so that when we have payments due in January of next year, we already have the money for it. So that's what we do in debt service and pension debt. So pension debt, we were approved for $1,276,000, but the revenue was only $991,000, and that was because of the refinancing that we just did. So that caught up to us. Capital projects, we were approved for $10,477,000. Revenue is only going to be $8,007,000. Now I'm projecting $1,464,000 in tax caps. That'll affect that. Projected expenditures, including tax caps, is now going to be $8,165,000, because if you subtract the $1,004,000 from $8,007,000, doesn't come out to $8,001,000. It includes the cash balance that we had from December 31st carrying over into this year. Transportation operating, we were approved for $5.4 million. Revenue is only going to be $5,001,000. We're going to have projected tax caps of $768,000. So we're going to be at about $4.5 million in expenditures is what we're looking at. We spent $4,004,000 last year. Now remember, we had a reduction in the bus replacement, so any money that I have to take out of bus replacement is going to come into bus operating. So we're not going to have much of a cash balance. It's going to be real tight in transportation operating. Bus replacement, we were approved for $1,150,000. Revenue was only $618,000. We're going to lose another $168,000, so we're going to be at $549,000. And about half of that goes for the contracted drivers, and then the other half goes to replace buses. So $225,000 will generate 2 1/3 bus. So I want to see how we're going to buy that third bus, 1/3 of a bus. So that's kind of where we're at right now. So we'll try to finalize this, you know, once we get a little bit more, once the legislature gets through with screwing around with our budget, and we know exactly where we're going to be. We'll come back with some more firmer numbers, I hope, for you. Any questions?
Any questions for
It's
Dr.
still a
Mike?
moving target, folks.
Thank you for the update.
At this point in time, we'd like to talk about graduation rates, and I'll turn it over to Mrs. Schnellenberg.
Okay, thank you. We're excited to share this data, and as of right now, it is preliminary data, but you can find it on the DOE website. With Ms. Fritz's assumption of the new role as Superintendent for Public Education, I think there's some reports that she wants to make sure, including the annual performance report, and this data is included in that. So she submitted kind of an all call to the media to make sure that this data is correct. So, but this is what's listed on the DOE website right now. We want to start with the concept of total graduates, and back in 2009, the calculation for graduation rates changed. We introduced the concept of a cohort, and the way we define graduation cohorts, we look at kids that enter as ninth graders, and the concept is, the goal was that when you enter as a ninth grader, you are to complete graduation in 4 years or less. So really the whole, idea that you would, it might take a kid 5 years, maybe a little bit extra, where I think the legislators respected that and saw that. The intent of the graduation calculation, or the graduation rate calculation, was to focus on this 4-year rate. So when we talk about total graduates, we're looking at those students who completed in 4 years as part of that cohort and may have done it with or without a waiver. That's our total graduation. So from the state of Indiana rate at this point was 87.9. Pleased to report that Greater Clark overall had exceeded for the first time in quite a while the state rate at 88.3. If you go to the next slide and we just look at the preliminary data around this area, Greater Clark again at 88.3. We have Clarksville reporting out at 95.4, West Clark at 93.3, and New Albany at 94.5. Again, total graduates, we are a little bit behind this area, but again, exceeding the state, and we, as you'll see kind of as we go through future slides, making significant gains from where we have been. We wanted to look at this concept of waived and non-waived students. When we talk about non-waived, that means that they've met all the criteria, which means they've passed the ECA, what used to be the GQE, the ECA in Algebra 1 and in English 10. And for the state as a whole, 9% of the students in the state were granted a waiver. We'll go through the criteria of a waiver, but that means that 91% of the students, basically, by the time they graduated, they may not on the first try have passed that Algebra 1 or English 10, but by the time they were 12th graders, they met that criteria, passed those exams, and so met the criteria for graduation. In Greater Clark, we had 89% of our students, by the time they were 12th graders, complete that. Clarksville, again, if you can kind of look at what the other school corporations around the area, breaking down the waived and non-waived. You go to the next slide. We look at our individual high schools. At Charlestown High School, we had a total graduation class of 127 students. Of those 127, 122 of those students were non-waived. Charlestown High School had 5 waived students for a 4% waived rate. Jeffersonville High School had 408 total graduates. 349 of those students were non-waived. 59 students waived for a 14% waived rate. And New Washington High School, 66 total grads, 62 non-waived, 4 were waived for a 6%. If you look in the area, and we tried to rank these just based on the waived, and again, I want to emphasize these are preliminary numbers. Charleston High School had the lowest percent of waived students at that 4%. Lots of emphasis on support and looking at and how they get those kids to pass the exams, retakes, and we'll talk a little bit more about the support systems that are in place. New Washington at 6%. As you can tell back on the earlier slides, the state had a single digit, 9% of waived. Our goal would be obviously to be in a single digit. You want less than 10% of your students to be waived. We go down to Jeffersonville at 14%. Borden High School had 13% waived. New Albany was the highest in this area preliminarily at 20% waived. let's talk about what it takes to get a waiver. And in the past, these used to be called GQE waivers. They're now divided into two, evidence-based waivers and work-based waivers. So on to the next slide. ECA evidence-based waivers. We work very hard with these waivers because there's a lot of steps that go into a waiver. The first thing is that in order to qualify for an evidence-based waiver, the student has to take the ECA at least once every year that it's offered. So if as a freshman I take the Algebra 1 assessment and I don't pass it, but I pass the Algebra 1 class, let's say I just did not do well on that test, I have to take it every year as a sophomore, junior, and senior until I pass it. That's a requirement. What we require here in Greater Clark, and that's one of the number 2, where it says completes remediation opportunities, until a student passes that assessment, let's say that they move on to a geometry class or Algebra 2, we make them double up in a math class. In other words, we make them take a supporting class until they've passed that ECA. Oftentimes, I may master the content, but when I get into that test-taking environment, maybe I don't do as well. If I've moved into a geometry subject area, maybe I'm not getting enough preparation to retake that test, so we want to make sure that they've got support systems in place in preparation for that ECA. So we've got very strong support systems in place for students to have that, number one, emphasis on the Algebra 1 content, but also support on how to take the assessments and support in place as well. Another key in terms of the ECA waivers is that a student has to have 95% attendance. The student also has to maintain a C or 2.0 average in graduation course requirements and satisfy the local graduation and credit requirements. If you go to the next slide, this is a relatively new waiver requirement that was put in a couple years ago, and it's considered a work readiness waiver. A little bit of this is the emphasis on the career readiness, but most of it is the same in terms of retaking the test when it's offered and passing, getting involved in the remediation. But there are also assessments in place now with an emphasis on industry certifications, and so a student might maybe be following a career path within their high school course. Maybe I'm studying within a good example would be the computer science, where I might take Microsoft certifications. That can qualify them also for a waiver. So in order to pass maybe some work keys assessment or a workforce, I may be able to prove my competency on those proficiencies in that direction as well. So there are those two, either kind of curriculum-based or work readiness-based definitions that I'm able to use for the waiver process. Go ahead. If you look at the non-waiver graduates, which are strictly the students that pass utilizing the ECA for Algebra 1 and English 10, in Indiana, 80.1% of the students were a non-waiver graduate. If you look at Greater Clark, it is 78.3. We reduced that gap to 1.8. If you look back when the cohort concept started in 2009, we had a 10.1% gap from the state. So we've reduced that over the last 3 years by almost 10%. So we've been doing a lot of work with students with credit recovery. We've been doing a lot of work with students on just remediation and doubling up math, doubling up English where necessary. For better or for worse, our summer school programs have been based on credit recovery. Not a lot of enrichment at this particular point. As budgets have been cut, we've really had to focus, unfortunately, and they have been targeting towards these credit recovery opportunities. If you go to the next area comparison, again, just in kind of looking at where the non-waivers, Again, Indiana at 80.1, Greater Clark at 78.3, in Clarksville 82.8, West Clark 84.1, and New Albany 82.4. So we're a little bit closer on these non-waiver. If you look at the high schools with non-waivers on the last slide, look at Floyd Central with the highest at 90.5. We just kind of ranked these. Silver Creek was 86.4. New Washington then was 86.1. Charlestown not far behind at 85.3. Henryville at 84.1. Clarksville at 82.8. Borden at 77.2. Jeffersonville at 74.9. And New Albany at 74.7. So again, the two largest in the Jeffersonville and New Albany, probably the closest in size and demographics, are closer to the same. So, still have a lot of work to do on graduation rate from a high school perspective in terms of impact, which we've come back to talk to you about just about every time. We're still focusing quite a bit of our impact at the high school on credit recovery. The whole concept of graduation rate is involved with our A through F accountability at the high school, so it's a big focus. Right now, as we've presented before, are limited just since we've started Impact. We've really focused just on our ECA, English 10, and Algebra 1, but that will expand. We're really looking at the number and percent of students that are earning all their credits. What we really find is if we can catch them as freshmen, if you fall too far behind in your credits after your freshman year, sometimes they give up, and they give up pretty quickly. If we can catch them up, oftentimes by the time they're at the end of their sophomore year and they see they're not so far behind, we have a better opportunity of catching them up. There's kind of a maturity shift that happens when they're juniors. They kind of see the end a little bit, it's a little bit closer for them. So lots of work to do.
Board, also, the one thing that when this cohort philosophy began, I started to think a lot about a success rate, not just a graduation rate. Because if you look at the IDOE site, there's a pie chart. And the pie chart reflects, one part of it is the number of students who actually graduate with a diploma in 4 years. And that's what you're seeing with these percentages. 88.3% of our students in Greater Clark graduated in a 4-year period. But there are other students, too, that are reflected on that pie chart that I view as a success. One is special ed students. Special ed students, there's a percentage of them that earn a certificate of completion. And to me, they have successfully completed their program. But that percentage is not reflected in that 88.3%. The other factor that we have is students who end up earning a GED. And again, we prefer students to earn a regular high school diploma, but we have a percentage of students who do earn a general education diploma, a GED. And to me, that's a success. And so I'd like to refer to it really as a success rate when you include those other areas. The thing I look at in the pie chart are the dropouts, because those are the kids that we don't want to have any of. There's another part of that pie chart that's still in school. So those kids that didn't get it done in 4 years, they may take an extra semester to get it done. They're reflected on the pie chart too. To me, that's not a failure. That's still a success story. And so the graduation rates, I'm fine with what it's saying to us, but I think we need to put it in perspective. The big issue to me is what are our dropouts that we have in our school system, because we don't want any student to be counted as a dropout. So the philosophy that I think is starting to permeate through our corporation, and we're going to continue to make sure it does, is the mentality that no student is going to walk away from their high school education. No student. If we have to hold their hands, we have to do what it takes to get them to school, to get them into our alternative program, to get them into the GED program. We're going to do everything in our power to make sure that we've done everything we can to make sure a student is a success. Whether that ends up being a GED, a certificate of completion, or a 4-year diploma. So I just want to tell you that that's the culture that we need to have in all of our high schools, that every single student makes a difference, and we're going to have give them individual attention to make sure they know that they need to get that education. I think that's why you've seen a 10% increase in graduation rate in just a year in our school corporation, based upon the work and the commitment of a lot of people that have developed that kind of mentality.
Amy, on that pie chart, he's talking about the dropouts and the not there yet. You know, it's going to take them more than 4 years to get their diploma. And unfortunately, we can't go back and count those as graduates, even though they will graduate. Do you know how many of, when, in a former life, when I looked at that pie chart for a school corporation I worked for, it was very interesting to see how many credits those kids were actually short. Do you know what the average number of credits those kids are short?
I don't know the average, but I do know, and I'm glad that you brought that up, because this year we've, because of some changes in Title I, we've started to expand Title I services and started serving high schools. And we're serving Jeffersonville High School is the first one that we've served. Part of what our Title I interventionists at the high school, they've gone back, and anyone that falls in that category, they've pulled the number of credits that they were short and have made those personal contacts, gotten them into the right program, either through Clark County Middle High or back at Jeff High through credit recovery. So I can tell you that there have been a handful that within a year could have made their credits and they're back into our fold. There are some that were pretty far apart, but we got them back into a GED program.
Okay.
So I think that the outreach that we've started to do, we're developing the systems to address just what you said, and to make sure that we don't lose them. I mean, there is no way we should lose them. We've got the stop gaps, I think, in place for that not to happen, because you're absolutely right.
A couple other questions. On the work readiness waiver, I understand that's new. Do you have any idea how many of our students, probably not many, did they?
There's not many. I think at Charlestown High School there might have been 3. At Jefferson High School, I think last year there were 12. I mean, very small. But last year was our first year that we really have expanded the number of industry certifications.
Okay.
They keep increasing. Probably at the end of this year we'll come back to you with our numbers on industry certifications, because we really have been increasing that program.
Okay. And on the waiver, the qualifications to get a waiver, either one, I see that there's a written recommendation from the teacher, and then it goes to the principal. Is there any central office oversight on that process?
There's not central office, except for the fact that we've set up the criteria that we utilize acuity assessments. We have kind of the thresholds of the assessments that we set up with the principal and the department chairs, that we've defined proficiency through our acuity assessments, or now we have STAR in place, we'll set those thresholds. So that's kind of been our oversight, is once this kind of goes back to almost to the GQE when we had that was kind of what they said. If we had those numbers in place or that data in place, it kind of validated, I think, the teachers signing off, and then thus the principal. So that's where we had worked in place. We don't sit in on their committees when they sign off,
Okay.
but we sat in to establish those cutoffs, if you will, with those.
Board, I just looked up on the IDOE site, and I mentioned the dropouts, 6.6% dropouts for Greater Clark. That was 45 students. That's 45 students too many. But when you look at the size of our graduating class, our senior class, 6.6%. The rest of those kids, 93%, are a success story.
What percentage was, and then just haven't made it yet?
Still in school?
You're still in school.
Yeah, I think it's 2%. 2.2% are still in school, and we have certificate of completion 2.1%, and then we have some GED students as well, 1% GED. So we're continuing to maximize our efforts, and I'll continue to talk success rate, because I think those other kids are important too that are in there. And I think we just need to lock in on the potential dropouts and do everything in our power to not let them do it. And we may not be able to save everyone, but we better have a mindset that we're going to do everything in our power to try. And I think that's why we've had a 10% improvement in our graduation rate just in the past year, because I think that mindset is really starting to take hold.
Congratulations on that. I know how hard it is to move that rate, and that's great.
It's the school-based, I'll tell you, it's
Yep.
been great.
The schools have done a good job.
Thank you, Amy.
May I just say one thing for mentoring? I just think that's huge. When you keep a child in school, if the child, they form some allegiance to that person, and that person can say, from day one, you're expected to graduate. I'm going to be here. And sometimes when that mentor is there at a specific time every week, that's the only consistent thing that kid can really bank on. Because that person is going to really be there, and they're going to be saying every time they're there, and how are we doing with graduation, and how are we doing. And that person's really important when we're talking about the people we might need to keep in school. Sometimes it's that person that does that.
I agree.
So we need to make sure we have that program and it's going strong. And we need to appeal to the public to
help us.
Yes.
I agree.
Get in there and do that. Yeah.
All right.
I'll go to the next.
Data dashboard.
Okay.
Thank you, Amy.
Board, we've been doing a lot of work on this data dashboard piece, and I think the last time we came before you, we had shown you a spreadsheet that had a lot of information. What we decided to do is we wanted to make something that was easier for people to read, and so, and what you can see in the back of the room, you can see a monitor. We've purchased monitors through our Capital Projects Fund, and these will be installed in every building. And you can see the dashboard running. It's in a PDF format. But what we'll do, this is what you'll see in our building, but in every specific school, they'll have their own specific school information. And I'm going to show you examples of that this evening. But these monitors will be installed. We have the capability of downloading these graphs from the central office. Karen Spencer has done a tremendous job for us putting the graphs together. She will produce all of the presentations for each school. Jason Davis in our tech department will download the information into all these monitors. And so this is a way for this data to stay out in front of our public, to see where we are and where we're heading. So what we'd like to do is show you the most updated graphs. And you can see the demographic data here. And you can see state average is in green, district average is in the purple. Quarter one information is in blue, and quarter two is in red. So you can see in free and reduced lunch, special education, ESL, and ethnicity. You can see where we fall relative to the state and the district average and where we are. Look at how our free and reduced lunch population exceeds the state, and even as we've progressed through this school year, it continues to grow, which is a challenge that we're ready to take on, but it is a challenge. Special education, we're at about 16.8%. Our ESL population, English as second language, 7.4%. That continues to grow in our district. And from an ethnic perspective, we have 31% of our students currently, one of every three, that is a non-white student, which to me is a strength. Our reading goal is here in front. 90% is our goal to the left. You can see where our elementaries were, quarter one and two, and you can see middle and high school. Some people will say, well, geez, are you telling me reading at grade level, 63% of our high school kids are reading at grade level? Well, right now, based upon the standardized data we're using, yes, that's true. I don't know how that compares to other school systems. We don't have that data for the state average, but we put ours out there, and that's fine. We are putting together programs to help improve reading capability of our students. We have an instructional cabinet occurring right now And I would project that that information will continue to grow and increase. Here's our English language performance, grades 3 through 8. Our goal is for 80% passage, and for Pass Plus it's 17%. So you can see where we are relative to the state and what our goal is. English language arts passage, 77.6. Now this is data that relates to last school year, which is the last time the results were available. And if you can look at our English language arts Pass Plus, to me that's another area that we really need to push our top students to higher levels. So we want to at least get above the state average as a first step. Next. Math, here's the same kind of graph. You can see where we are, very close in math passage to the state. We have a little bit further to go. Pass Plus, not too bad, but again, would love to get up to exceed the state average. High growth, this is that growth model. Top 75% of our students, how many of them are in high growth related to language arts and math? You can see language arts on the left, math on the right. You can see that we are below the state average slightly in language arts, a little bit more so perhaps in math. You can see what our goals are as we're moving forward. And hopefully you'll start to see some progress made after our ISTEP test results come back. This is the bottom 25% of our students in high growth. Again, we're all about trying to make sure that our students are getting that high growth category. And you can see, the good news is 1/3 of our students who struggle the most are in high growth. So that means, to me, that's a positive. Our kids who are 1/3 of our students who are in that category of students who struggle the most are in high growth. That's a good thing. Now, relative to the state, we're not quite where we want to be, but let's see how we can continue to improve as we move down the road. Algebra 1 performance, our goal is 90%. You can see what the state average is, 81.9. We are at 78.9 as a corporation. The state goal and our goal is 90%. And again, this is a big ticket item as it relates to graduation. Students need to pass that exam in order to earn that non-waiver, graduation rate.
Is that really grades 9 through 12?
Yes.
We don't test our 8th graders?
What we do, we test our 8th graders, but I believe what this data is showing is this comes right from the state DOE website.
Took it in the 7th and 8th? Well, you don't have it, we don't have it in 7th and 8th.
Yet.
Okay.
Next year.
All right.
Yep, so that's the cohort. And the same thing holds true here. So this is cohort information. We decided to give you the exact information that's on the IDOE site. We also are collecting information relative to what our passage is by the time students are seniors. So that might be some charts that we could add because obviously students will take it again 10th, 11th, and 12th grade year, and those percentages of passage do go up. But we decided to go with the state information related to average and goal. Algebra 1, high growth. Now this shows both, this is how the state measures it in terms of that growth model. They measure it in both from 8th grade to 10th grade and from 10th to 12th. Now you can see over on the left side, our growth of students, this is high growth, the percentage of students in high growth in terms of their percentage of improvement from 8th to 10th grade, 5.9%, well below the state average. We need to look at that. We need to figure out what's happening with that. But then, on the other hand, look at what's happening from 10 to 12. A lot of those efforts that Amy was suggesting to you, those are working. Our high schools are really doing a heck of a job with 73.1% of those kids in high growth. That's an impressive number that we're exceeding the state average by far. English 10, you can see the same data. We obviously need to look at 8 to 10 in terms of what's happening there in that transition. But from 10 to 12, it's pretty impressive. So this is data that points out areas that we can be pleased with, but other areas in which we need to put some greater focus on. Average daily student attendance, our goal is 96%. The state average, in fact, is 96.1. Last year, as a corporation, we're at 95.1. Quarter one, we were above at 96.6, and quarter two, 95.6. So that's pretty high attendance. I mean, obviously we want to at least be at 95%, but our goal was hoping that last year we were at 95.1. Could we get to that 96% mark? So it's going to be a challenge as we go through this third quarter, because traditionally second and third quarter become times in which attendance becomes a little bit more of an issue with health-related matters and so on. But it gives you an idea of where we are. Let me show you students with... You're good. You've been doing great. You've been doing great. Students with greater than 95% attendance. So we're tracking students who have greater than 95% attendance. And you can see that at the high school level, the goal is 67%. For Greater Clark last year, we were only 49.6% of our high school kids had 95% attendance or greater. This year, so far, after semester one, it's at 74%. So our attendance at the high school level is greatly improved. You can see that holds true at the middle school level as well at the elementary level. So our attendance, though the percentage of kids with 95% attendance or greater is increasing greatly. Then we have elementary students with no behavioral referrals. Again, no behavioral referrals. Goal is 91%. Last year we had 89%. And look at where we are. After first quarter, we were at 93.7. And this is cumulative data. So on a cumulative basis, we're at 90.1% of our students. So, we'll see how we continue to progress here to try to exceed that district goal. At the middle school level, think about that. 70% is our goal. 66.4% of our students had no behavioral referrals. This year, look at where we were at quarter one. Of course, we slipped a little bit into quarter two. That's not uncommon. Second and third quarters sometimes become more challenging from a behavioral perspective. But, we'll see where we end up at the middle school level. And then, did we have to graduate for the elementary? Yeah, my fault. Thank you. Graduation rate, we've already gone over that information, but it's here. And then college and career readiness. This is another one of those growth pieces. This is how we're graded as a district. You can see the state average was 41.7%. We were at 27.2. Now, our goal is 30%, but it's important to keep in mind that the state goal is 25%. So we are exceeding the state goal as it relates to college and career readiness. And you can see over on the right, how do you get that percentage? And a big reason is our AP exams and our passing score. And now what we think is really going to help us is we have far more dual credit opportunities this year. And we think that that's going to start to play. This other criteria will start coming into play, as well as our continued emphasis on more industry certification. So it's our goal that I think what you'll see with all the dual credit opportunities over time, you'll start to see our percentage increase in addition to the emphasis we've had on AP exam passage. So that gives you a sense. What I'll do here is we'll go over the Spring Hill. I won't go over it in as much detail, perhaps, but this will be a reflection of what each school's data dashboard will look like. And so what you can see here is you can see some demographic data on free, reduced lunch and mobility. This is Spring Hill. So you can see for our school corporation, free and reduced lunch, 54.3% in 11-12. You can see free and reduced lunch at Spring Hill was 94%. In quarter one, it was 92. In quarter two, it's 93. Spring Hill Elementary, 94% free and reduced lunch population.
A school, A rating.
A school, which we were going to try to get to. So, and then again, here's some more data. So this is data specific to Spring Hill related to the demographics. Let's go on to the next. From an English language arts performance perspective, look at the As a school corporation, we were at 77.6. Spring Hill last year was at 87. Their school goal is 90% in terms of passage. You can see the same data as it relates to Pass Plus, but Spring Hill is performing very well as it relates to our I-STEP performance in grades 3 through 5. The next slide would be mathematics, and again, Spring Hill is exceeding the district average, and its school goal is 85%. And again, at that Pass Plus rate, we'd like to see that number going up, but pass rate at Spring Hill with 90% plus free reduced lunch, doing an outstanding job. Students reading at grade level. As a school corporation, 47.1% last year. You can see the school was at 65% last year. The school goal is 75% this year, and you can see where they are in quarter 1 and quarter 2. Again, these are using standardized measures, and that's where we're getting this data. Percent passage of I-read. The state goal is 90%. As a district last year, we're at 84. Last year, Spring Hill was 97% of their kids were passing I-read. The school goal this year is 98%. Pretty impressive. You can see high growth. You can read the chart and see where we are with high growth in Spring Hill, in both English language arts and math. We also have the same thing in that bottom 25%. We are doing a good job at Spring Hill overall with what's happening. Average daily student attendance is very high at Spring Hill. Not uncommon. Elementaries generally will have very high attendance rates. Look at the percentage of students with 95% attendance or greater. 95% with no behavioral referrals, that's the goal. And you can see that they're, after quarter 2, at 95.2% of their kids, no behavioral referrals. Very impressive. So again, Karen Spencer will produce these presentations for every school. They'll be downloaded once the monitors are installed. We're in that process of getting that done. We hope somewhere in the mid-April time frame the monitors will be installed at each school in a very visible area, so as the public comes in, they can see where we are. And hopefully it's fairly easy to read and will be something that we can be held accountable to as we continue to move our school district forward. Any questions?
Dr. Millen, I just have one. How transparent is this data across schools? So if I have a third grade teacher in Spring Hill that's doing a really great job, can a third grade teacher at Bridgepoint be able to see that data on how they're doing and possibly, collaborate between them?
On these graphs, it'll be school specific. What we want to do is internally, let's just bring up the corporation data dashboard for a minute. Remember, this is the information we're still tracking internally. And I just wanted to share with you, now there's some things in yellow that we have made sure that we've not, we want to make sure that we're careful with some of this information. But the bottom line is, internally, we want our people looking at this data all the time. And so our principals should be looking at how their school is doing. This is the district dashboard. Each school has their own dashboard, and we want our principals looking at where they are and how their schools compare to other schools. Now, internally, there are other data points that we have that show how successful each class of students is. And as we start to see that within our own building, there might be a third grade teacher in my building that might just be really having a great deal of success. Then during our collaboration zero periods, there should be some conversation about, well, why is it that your kids perform so well on that particular standardized test? So that kind of conversation is occurring currently in our buildings. And then as we get principals together and collaborate across the district, hopefully we'll have more of that, those opportunities.
I think that answers my question. I think the transparency is really good. And I know we're not there yet. I know it's part of the strategic plan, but for other schools to be able to look inside what other schools are doing, I think would be a great help, just, for improving scores and testing and those kind of things. So.
One thing that I've found since coming to Greater Clark, our principals are highly competitive. And it's amazing, whether I meet with them individually or meet with them as a group, how they have a tendency to really want to sort of outdo one another. Mm-hmm. And that can be very healthy.
That's a good thing.
And yes, they want to help one another, but they also want to outperform one another. And so I think they're constantly looking at how one another's schools are doing, and they're comparing their schools to other schools. And I know that our principals are constantly looking internally at the effectiveness of each classroom, just to make sure that if there are ways that one classroom can become stronger, then let's talk about that and let's figure out how that can happen. Those conversations are occurring.
One other suggestion is, on your presentations, could we put a source at the bottom so we know where that data is coming from?
Sure.
Okay.
Absolutely.
I think that would be helpful to everyone that's looking at it.
The one thing on the dashboard I hope you noticed when we had that up there briefly is we put the data source in a column so everyone knows where to go find it. So it's not on the graph, so we'll add that to the graphs.
Right.
But on the dashboards themselves, for every data point, we have a reference as to where the data is found.
Mm-hmm.
But we'll add that to the best of our ability to the graph so people know.
Yeah. Okay.
Good suggestion.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Okay. Then we'll move on to board comments. Mr. Hall?
None?
Ms. Perkins?
I'm just blown away at some of this data. I'm a data queen anyway, so I'm just excited. And a lot of hard work. I know it is going into that. Congratulations.
Mm-hmm.
And Spring Hill.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm really excited to see all the other elementary schools, and just got to get to work on those middle schools.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. White? Mrs. Kraft? Mr. Pavey?
Again, I'm a big fan of the data. I won't call myself a data queen, but
I hope not.
A big fan of the data.
Okay, I'll
and
share the spotlight.
I know we're just getting started, but this is a great start, and I know we're gonna get better and better at this. And I just would encourage you to stay with the transparency, because I think it's good for everybody to see what everybody else is doing. It's been very successful in business world. So anyway.
I appreciate everybody's hard work, but I want to point out a couple specific people this week. One is, I noticed that our personnel reports are looking a little different, and I wanted to thank you, Donna and Travis, for working hard on our hiring practices and our checklists and making sure that we're doing things to the best of our ability. And I noticed it, and I appreciate it, and I wanted you to know that. And then also, everybody on the board knows we had a little breakfast episode at one of our schools this week. Robert, I wanted to thank you for getting on that and dealing with it and making sure that everybody is understanding of how our policy really works, so that we don't have that situation occur again with one of our students. I appreciate it. Dr. Mellon?
Just a couple of things. Our Jeff High basketball team lost in the semi-state to Indianapolis Cathedral. But the thing I guess I just want to point out is I think this team exceeded expectations this year. And how that happens is not only because of some natural talent that the kids possess, but you have to be able to pull that talent together to work as one. And throughout the year and throughout the tournament run, I felt that Coach Gilbert and his staff did an outstanding job of making sure the kids were prepared. They played together, they followed a game plan, and I think they were great ambassadors for Jeffersonville High School, but also our school corporation, so I congratulate them on their season. And also wanted to point out Aramark were chili champs at a recent event, and so again it shows the overall quality. They care a lot about the quality of what they do, and they're willing to put themselves out there and compete, and I think that's pretty neat. So I want to congratulate them, and thank you, board, for your continued support of our kids.
Need a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Perkins.
Second.
Second, Mr. Hall. All in favor?